Senator Rucho and Senator Garou, thank you so much for taking time to talk with us.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be with you.
Senator Garou, how will the average North Carolinian be affected by this budget?
People will see increase in the children's class size. We will know that possibly teachers may be furloughed, that they will not be getting a raise. State employees will not be getting a raise. People who operate a small business or a small farm will be getting a tax reduction, so that'll be affecting working families. This has really been a tough budget and a tough year as we've tried to work through some of these issues.
But not as tough as last year.
Well, both years have been difficult, and we've had cuts. We took last year $2.9 billion worth of cuts and close to $600 million cuts this year. So you put the two things together, and it's been quite difficult for a growing state.
Senator Rucho, on the floor during debate, you pointed out that this is a Band-Aid for a bleeding artery.
It is. The problem has been going on, and it's a functional problem where if you set a budget and you keep adding on layer of the continuation budget, it's going to lead to this kind of a problem. Our tax revenues can't keep pace. If you think that you're spending and taxing to a continuous positive economy, well, this is a wake-up call. And what we noticed, as severe as this was, with 11% unemployment, which we're facing, and much more in my county and a lot of other surrounding counties, we're paying the piper finally. And reality is we're seeing less than 2.6% growth, which is what we expect to see in the next year to meet the needs of what is close to $1 billion worth of shortfall. Now, can it be solved? Of course it could. Years back, if we'd have started off at zero and based our budget on the core values and the core needs of a government, whether the education, public safety, the safety net and other things, we could have structured a budget that would have not been as severely damaged, and our people would probably not have had as severe a time in overcoming what we're experiencing now.
Senator Garou, is this budget setting up for the future to be paying whatever money that was allotted that won't come in?
Well, certainly we know that the federal government will not be providing stimulus money next year, and it is going to be difficult. Let me just say that we are not alone in this issue. This is an issue that's faced all the federal states, and perhaps it's a misery loves company feeling that we're in this tight situation, but I believe we've made good decisions. I mean, we could have a zero-based budget. We know we'd have, with increasing numbers of children coming to school. We pay back our community college a year after they've been to school. We've had a 16% increase in community college. We've got the university enrollment growth. We have some of those things before we even start on that. You started out with a zero-based budget. I'm not sure you'd come up with different numbers, and it would be very complicated to do. It's certainly something.
Why not take each one of the programs and departments and start from zero? You, as have been saying, and as well as other chairs, that you're finding fraud, you're finding inefficiencies. Why not do an across-the-board check of every department?
Well, we have our work is done in subcommittee works. We've got subcommittee chairmen who look at, for example, education. We have folks who look at public schools. We've got community college. We've got the university system. We know that, for example, we had money that was not used in the public school system, and that money came back to the budget. So those things are done, although we don't start with a zero-based budget in that specific way. All of those things are done. We're looking carefully at all of those issues. So I believe we do catch up with where the problems are.
I won't argue. Senator Garou and her folks have worked very hard to put together a budget. And, there's a fundamental difference in that. There are a number of states in the United States that were fiscally responsible and aren't in the same situation as we are. In my judgment, and a number of other folks that are looking at this economy, the tax and spend policies that have occurred over the last 10 to 15 years have exacerbated the problem in this recession. You know, this is a downfall. We understand that. But should it have been as severe? I don't think we would have had as bad a situation. I don't think we'd have had 11 and 12% unemployment in North Carolina had we had a different policy on spending and on taxation. And I'll give you a perfect example. You do not raise $1 billion worth of taxes during middle of a severe recession. You know, all the money that we thought was going to come in that last budget, we were about $320 million short of that, which meant the people didn't have any money to buy anything, to goods and services, which is what will end up taking us out of this recession.
But Senator Rucho, you've heard this argument. If you don't raise that $1 billion in revenue, where will you cut?
Well, you know, am I going to say I'm going to cut? I'm going back to square zero, as we should have done early on, and taking care of our priorities. You know, education being one, public safety, the prisons and the like, a safety net on for our folks, and then go from that point, and you spend up to the point where you have revenues to afford. You don't go into, not deficit spending, but it can occur because we say we're going to have a 3.3% growth in revenues and it only turns to be 2.6. That's a deficit spending because we spent the money, or at least budgeted it, and turned out that it wasn't true. And, you know, what was it, a week to 2 weeks after the last budget passed, Governor Perdue said we need a 5% across the board stop, which meant it never even let that budget get forward. You know, it stopped 2 weeks after we passed it in what, July. So, you know, it proved that it wasn't working, and now we're adding to the problem again. And especially knowing that next year, quote, the temporary taxes are going to lead to about $1.2, $1.3 billion in no money. If we mean it's a temporary tax, that means it expires. We're going to see they have about $1.6 billion of stimulus money from the federal government, which was used to balance the budget. It's non-recurring. That's almost a $3 billion hole already. And then you add on Medicaid, you add on health care costs.
Well, let's take them one at a time. Senator Garou, with the federal stimulus money, you have said it's not going to be there. What's going to happen to those programs?
Well, we're going to have to look at those programs carefully, and that's what happens when you've got a state that's dependent on tobacco, furniture, and manufacturing. I mean, part of our problem is our business model has changed. We don't have the same kind of businesses. That's why we have such high unemployment. And as far as the number of states who are not suffering from some of these problems, I don't know about them. Texas and a few of these smaller states that have oil supplies or gas supplies or have very small populations, but North Carolina is growing. We're going to have, with the loss of California losing its wonderful school system, the premier university system in the United States. People are going to look at the University of North Carolina and the system that we have, and we're going to support that system. We're going to support our community college system. And if you take our education, you take our Health and Human Services, you take our court system, that gets us close to 85% of the budget. So when people say do away with all of government, that gets you very little. So you can go back to the zero-based budgeting, which is a ploy. The counties and cities find that is something they really can't do, and certainly at the level we're talking about, it's not something that's practical. But I agree, we need to be looking at better ways to spend our money, and we try to do this.
To say it's not practical, Linda, is wrong, because businesses do it all the time. And they function with budgets that are in excess of $20 billion. Yet they go ahead and they are sure of the fact that every dollar spent is achieving the goal that is desired in that program. You know, are there programs going on? You admitted earlier that there are a number of programs you found that weren't working. An example about the airplane in Hickory that's sitting in a hangar that doesn't fit. We're paying $150,000 a year. And first of all, the airplane was bought to put out fires and needs a lake, and there were no lakes in North Carolina big enough to suck the water up and to put fires out. So in essence, we're spending money on an existing hangar which didn't fit our airplane. The airplane will cost $1 million to refit. I mean, you know, at some point, when do you cut these out? And, you know, why don't we know it? Because you never looked to see a zero-based budget as to why that program existed.
How realistic is that, though, to go through every single department and do the departments with these decreased personnel right now, decreased funding, do they have the capability to even perform such examination of their programs?
If that's given a priority, yes, they do, because the bottom line is simple. You know, all we've ever done is layered upon layer. We have an expansion budget that's big that we battle over every year, and we have a continuation budget that's big. When do we look at that? You don't fight over $1 billion. You look at the $19 billion to determine if a program is meeting its goal.
Well, obviously, Senator Rucho hadn't been in some of our appropriations meetings because we've been scrubbing those numbers. We've been looking at the continuation budgets. We've been looking at the expansion budgets, which we don't have this year. We've been looking to see what we have and what ways that we can streamline government. I agree, it's something that we need to do.
Let's move on to the lottery. The lottery in 2005 was passed for a specific purpose, the education lottery,
Right.
going to keep class size down, going to building and so forth. Now, the Senate budget writers do a one-time influx of lottery money into something that wasn't under the legislation. Why take that move, and is this a slippery slope? Is the lottery money going to start going to other places?
This past year, the lottery funds came in greater than we had hoped that they would do. We've allocated money to all of the provisions of the lottery in the same amount of money that they got last year. Counties will get $147 million in capital allocations to build new schools. We needed this money to keep up with enrollment growth at the universities, and that, you know, it was a scholarship issue. We've had need-based scholarships, so we've used it for that money for this one time.
Well, I'm wondering about setting up a law, passing a law with a specific purpose, and then years later coming in and saying, well, we need it for something else. Is this setting a precedent?
Well, it's an education issue, and it fits right into the whole issue we're talking about of educating children and educating students at the university level.
It's no different than we using 9/11, the 911 money for operating budget, and we use the transportation money for operating budget. This is just another way of picking into a pile of money, and to say there was more money than normally is. You're supposed to use that money to expand the education, to pay attention to the 30% dropout rate that we're experiencing, to pay attention to the students that are graduating from the North Carolina public schools that have to receive remedial education before they enter the community college and university system in reading and English and math. That's basic. We need to remediate them so that they can actually participate at that level. Why wouldn't we be using that money on that area? That's where it needs to be done. We've got some real deficiencies in the public system that isn't being met, yet we use that to fund another area. That just doesn't work in the scheme of things if you're trying to make it better. And, you know, and all we're doing is spending more money.
When the lottery first passed in 2005, most Republicans were against it. Now that you have this extra money to spend wherever, whether it's what the law said or what the budget writers think, are you glad that there's that money?
Well, I will say to you, I wasn't here at the time, and I would have voted no because I was worried that it would be nothing but supplant whatever the state was going to put into education.
But now you know that there's this additional revenue.
Well, you know what, that to me is an area that, you know, it's pulling money out of the private sector and using it on state expenses, where if you use it on state spending, you're not growing wealth, you're not growing prosperity. You grow prosperity by expanding small businesses, and there's where we're spending money, or where we should spend money, but unfortunately this budget does nothing to help that situation. And we're just exacerbating our recession that we have in North Carolina, and you know, we maintain a level of uncertainty in the small business to say we're not sure, we can't hire new people because of the fact that we don't know what government's going to do to us next on taxes, on regulation, on all the other things that have made it more expensive for North Carolina to have a small business program.
Is there any part of the budget that you do like?
Well, I think the issue that Senator Cotfelter brought up on some tax proposals.
$50 million towards small businesses.
Not that the money, I mean, you know, that was a point that I made with him and, you know, and Senator Stein during the debate. You know, we tax $1 billion on top of the people and the small businesses in the state of North Carolina, and we throw them a crumb of $50 million. You know what, that does nothing to help them. Is the concept good? Yes, but it really didn't deliver what we need to do at this point in time in North Carolina. If we want to work our way out of this recession, we need to grow jobs through small businesses, and that's where it needs to be done, and unfortunately this bill does nothing to help it.
And I haven't heard any suggestions from the Republicans where they would have cut that $1 billion last year. As we've said, education and health and human services is 80% of the budget. We've got children coming to school. Access for the university, community college, public school is such an important issue, and I think, you know, I keep waiting for them to come up with a suggestion of how we make some of those cuts that are real different. They may throw out, well, you could cut this or you could cut this one thing, but, you know, in the big scheme of things, we're talking about large sums of money, and we've got to keep our children prepared for the future.
Senator Groot, as you look at this budget and decisions that have been made, you've heard the debate on the floor saying that this is an election year, and therefore the taxes have not been increased. If the budget comes, the projections for the revenue collections come down low next year, will there be talk, is there a possibility of tax increases? And is that something you would support?
Certainly, you know, people are going to talk about different things. I have suggested to the governor we possibly look at maybe salary cuts. I mean, I think that's where we may be forced into.
Would
that's
tax
what
increases be something you'd look at?
I would not be looking at tax increases. I'd be looking at ways we could continue, and maybe we decide that we're going to have to continue to close some things and make those hard decisions, and they're very hard decisions. So I would look at those things first.
Well, the tax modernization plan that we spent the last 6 months working on in the Finance Committee is something worth looking at. The bad news is that the one proposal that we had as an example raised $553 million new dollars. It wasn't just a matter of broadening it and making it less volatile. This is nothing but a tax grab. They want more tax dollars to fill the gap that's going to occur in the out year. And you know what? That is the last thing we need to be doing. We got to keep North Carolina affordable. We need to keep our small businesses functioning, because that's where the wealth is grown and the prosperity for the people.
Final question for both of you. Are you optimistic about the future of North Carolina when taking a look at this budget and the possibility of an even bigger hole next year? Senator Rucho.
Well, I will say to you, I am optimistic because I chose to move here 33 years ago, and this is my home.
From Boston, right?
Oh, that's right. And you know what? It is the greatest place to live as far as climate and things to do and opportunities. Would I like to see it affordable? Would I like to not see businesses going out the back door to South Carolina because it's cheaper for them to be over there functioning, because South Carolina is less costly for them to function on? You know, we are the highest tax rate in corporate and personal income tax almost in the Southeast.
So you are optimistic?
Well, of course, but I think changes need to be made.
Senator
Certainly, I'm optimistic. We look at site selection, picks us as the best place to do business. We're one of 7 states that has a AAA bond rating. People are moving here all the time. Has anybody ever heard of University of South Carolina? No, except for football games. I mean, you know, let's be real. Let's talk about what things are really important. And we've made a decision here. We're going to look at what we can do to educate children and bring new jobs, new innovation, creativity jobs, because those are the jobs of the future. And people don't just fall off the turnip truck and do those jobs. They've got to have some preparation. I'm very optimistic about this state and the future lies ahead.
Senators, thank you both.
Thank you.